Okay, recording's on. And so this session will be recorded and it will be available online off the PMI website. And also we're looking at potentially having these available on YouTube, and that's something that we're working on. We might not be totally all there yet, but that's something to look forward to. So let's get started. So a little bit about me. I've basically been a member of the PMI chapter since 2012, and been working with Agile teams for probably around 12 years or so, probably even more now. And I really enjoy helping teams, coaching, mentoring, and just basically helping people follow Agile better. So Nitin, do you want to share a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm an Agile enthusiast. I love Scrummy things. I somehow find Scrum in everyday life. So I tell people, if you've taken a detour or changed diapers, hey, you've been Agile at some point. I work as an enterprise Agile coach. I've been a former Scrum Master. I've been a former product owner. And we're going to have a great time tonight.
All right, and again, this is part 2 of a session. And just in case there's some new joiners that weren't there for last month, basically an anti-pattern is something that is a recurring problem, and it basically ends up resulting in being somewhat counterproductive. So you might think it's harmless at first, but these things happen and they end up causing big problems. And with the announcement, we talked about something that recently happened to me with my team that I've been working with. I've been working with a DevOps team. I'm actually working with 3 teams in DevOps, and the product owner came in and thought they were being helpful, so they started writing subtasks for the stories that they were creating. And everybody on the team thought it was great. Here we have a product owner writing subtasks. And so, just to kind of refresh everybody's memory, is you have an item that the team volunteers for, and then they break the item into subtasks when they do the work in the sprint. And these subtasks may be maybe 2, 3, 5, 6, 7 things that the team needs to do to get that done. Now, what does everybody think about that? Do you think that's a good thing, or do you think that's a bad thing? Anybody can jump in. It's not a trick question. It's either good or bad.
Bad.
All right. Thank you, Linda. Any ideas?
We don't use subtasks. We find it too complicated if we do it. So we'd rather create multiple user stories or multiple tasks to cover the different things instead of having subtasks, because it gets too buried. That's a good way to do it. You know, we could have a whole meeting talking about this, you know, how Story actually breaks the items, you know, from the backlog so they can actually work on it. What I find is a subtask is good if you have a story that, like what you were saying, Marianne, your stories are, you know, are small. So maybe they might be able to complete that work in a day. What I try to do is have things on the board that will move, that represent a day or less worth of work. So now let's say you have a 5 or an 8-point story, you know, it has a little bit of work. If you don't have subtasks with that, the story would not move. The developer would put it in progress, and it might stay in progress for the whole sprint. So then what ends up happening is you don't really know where the developer is. So if they break it into subtasks, you know, maybe 5 or 8, every day you'd see movement where the developer would complete work on it. And so the reason you don't want your product owner creating subtasks is that once they start creating subtasks, they're doing the how. A product owner's job is to do the what and the why, and the development team's duty is to do the how. And now this is great, you know, for a team first starting off, but the problem is, what if that product owner leaves and the next product owner doesn't want to create subtasks? So now you have a team that can't do the work because there's nobody creating subtasks for them. So in essence, you might think you're helping the team, but you're actually crippling the team in the long run. And so I just wanted to share that because that's something that's happened with me in real life. And so, you know, again, I was trying to be somewhat official, you know, somewhat nice about it, but, you know, I kind of had to tell the product owner to stop. All right, now this is Miro. And basically this is the Miro board. And it's exactly where it was when we left off.
And we got feedback in the survey that you were not able to see the board or the cards. And so what I'm going to try to do is to address that feedback by making things a little bit bigger. And so the board, we have what I'm calling doors, and the items that we haven't seen yet are all these cards here. Another piece of the feedback that we received was that we were spending too much time talking about one item. So what I'd like to do is put a time box on, and maybe we could start with 5 minutes. And Nitin, if you don't mind, would you be able to do that while we're talking about it?
Yes. I did that last time and started pressurizing people, but it was good.
All right. And then the other thing that I wanted to ask is, can everybody hear me okay? Because I'm using my phone for audio. Is my voice clear enough?
Yes.
Yeah, it's clear.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Let's go then. All right. So who wants to pick a door? And they're numbered from 1 to 19, and there's a couple of choices. There's a door A and a B for like door number 2. For door number 3, there's a B. For 4, 5, there's A and B. So just yell out a number, please.
Number 11.
All right. Thank you for volunteering. So now what I'm going to do is change this to pointer, grab number 11, move it up here. And again, based on that feedback, I'm going to make it bigger so that we can read it. Now, everybody, can you read that okay, or should I try to make it even bigger?
Yes, we can read it.
All right.
Yeah.
Here's an anti-pattern. The chief architect hasn't approved that yet. Any thoughts about that?
Should it have been pulled out of the backlog?
Well, this could be something that the team is working on, or the product owner is asking the team to work on. And if you think about it, on a Scrum team, is there a role of an architect on a Scrum team? And the answer to that is no, there's not. So now we have some architects sitting outside the Scrum team, and they're saying that the chief architect hasn't approved that yet.
So I kind of would go back to the same thing I was saying before. So, right, within the Scrum team, you only have the developers that are there, but within an organization, you potentially would have a chief architect. So if you have a particular way of doing something or something that's pending on there, should it even be into the work yet?
That's what does everybody else think?
So I'm gonna. So when reality hits it, so first of all, the chief architect hasn't approved it yet. It almost sounds like a stage gate. You also hear of these things like sprint 0, like everything has to be approved by sprint 0. Really, the work should be done within the team. And the fact, as the former caller just indicated, the work is being done outside the team. All the work that the Scrum team should do should be self-contained within that team. And seeking approval outside is an anti-pattern.
Right, but you have to also be careful if you're working within a bigger, like I work in a bank and it has a bigger enterprise. And so anything that the team does that ultimately does need to get an enterprise architectural approval. And so that would be a separate process. So this to me is a tough anti-pattern because like what you said, Seth, everything's supposed to be done by the team, but yes, when you work in a bigger organization, you do have to go through, review boards and things like that. So I would, where would we place this as far as, where it is? Because actually we probably need a little bit more details about this particular anti-pattern as far as whether or not what type of technology they're using. is that what the chief architect needs to approve? Because you can't use any technology in a bank. You have to follow some level of enterprise architecture. So is it that, or is it the work's done and now we're just waiting for the architecture review board to actually approve it? So this could fall into a lot of different areas. And so, right now I would think it probably would fall between maybe the product owner and maybe the dev team. What does everybody else think about that as far as who could actually help with this?
So I'm going to chime in as a former product owner. I would treat the chief architect as a stakeholder, and I would have conversations on the product backlog items such as the user stories to see if they make sense, if they resonate, and once I get like a thumbs up or yay from chief architect, like any other stakeholder, I would then see if it would be marked as some sort of a ready state, because otherwise it'll just confuse people downstream. And so
I'm kind of agreeing with that because
architecture being important, but those are my thoughts.
I'm kind of agreeing with that because it is a stakeholder, and you really can't, if you don't have the architect sign off, you can't really develop the code because things could change. So if you go and develop code and everything changes, all the work you did is for naught. So I think it's a real big risk that has to be flagged and discussed.
All right. So where would we put this? Go ahead.
Because I think there's also a problem with, or a possibility of a problem if there's one chief architect and he has to be on everybody's Agile team, or everybody's, is that going to be an issue? Or perhaps there's, perhaps there's meetings that can be pre-scheduled, time slots so that you can grab him to do these kind of things.
Right. So what's it? I think I heard the time box go off. Was that true, Nitin?
That's true.
Okay. All right. Now, as a team, we've talked about this for 5 minutes. Should we finish it? Should we put it on the side? Because the last thing we would do is say which member of the team would actually help with this. Would it be everybody? Would it be the development team and the product owner, or would it be the Scrum Master and the development team, or would it be everybody? Any thoughts about that?
I'm leaning more toward the Scrum Master and the product owner. One of those two need to address this.
And I would add the development team, because the development team would be responsible to bring it to the actual architecture review board, because they represent the technology. So if it's okay with everybody, I think we'll just put it with all three. All right, so who wants to pick the next one? What door number?
9.
Number 9, thank you. Okay. We don't have to plan now that we're agile. We do stuff on the fly. How many people have heard that one?
All the time.
And it's so not true. Agile is the most planned out thing I've ever seen.
Has anybody off topics to their colleagues?
You need to plan everything.
When they hear?
All right, so everybody's heard this before. Usually I find that when I'm working with a new team, they don't quite get it. They kind of think that, working software is more important than comprehensive documentation. They always say, well, we don't document anymore because we're Agile, but that's not true either. So planning that's done quite a bit in Agile, as everybody here is alluding to. So, Nitin, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think Howard said, planning is important, but not the plan. So, hey, things evolve, but it doesn't mean, we should just lay back and relax. Must have some sort of vision, and see where are we headed. And if that changes along the line, then we'll be able.
All right, any other comments about this?
So
I think
I'm going to say, go ahead, MA, go.
I think one of the important pieces with the whole Agile methodology is having that inform the next piece, and sort of the sequencing and planning of work is all the more important because of that. So yeah, you have a bit of a shorter time horizon that you're planning for, but having the completion of step A inform the next piece of work and stuff, that's a key kind of benefit of the Agile methodology. And if you're not planning in that way, you sort of lose that benefit.
Yeah. The other comment I have about this is, from a long-range planning, it's a little different. So you don't want to plan to the nth degree, but you do want to have your huge backlog of high-level features and prioritize them. But then when you get to the short term, the way I tell it to new project managers going to Agile is like, you're still going to plan, but it's the 2 weeks. You're just going to plan as a project plan for the next 2 weeks. Yeah, it's a sprint plan, but that's the way they understand it. So you're going to plan to the nth degree for the next 2 weeks, and that's your sprint. All right. But don't do anything beyond that because it's too much scope, because everything changes.
Okay, so I think everybody's agreeing that definitely we do a lot of planning in Agile. And if you look at this Agile ceremonies, or you call them events, you have sprint planning, and that's basically a lot of teams. This is not in the Scrum Line anymore, but it used to be that there was part 1 and part 2. Part 1 was when you're with the customers and you describe the work you want the team to do, and part 2 is when the team gets together and actually breaks the work into subtasks, if you are doing subtasks, and also then decides whether or not they have capacity in order to actually complete that in the sprint. So there's a lot of planning doing. And also when you have your daily Scrum, the team gets together every day and they plan. And they have meetings after the daily Scrum where they continue planning. So where would we put this type of thing if you had a problem with that? Any
in the
ideas?
center, all team are responsible.
Oh, so you're saying put it in the center?
Yeah.
Okay, we could do that. Anybody have any other ideas? All right, so it looks like putting it in the center is the winner.
Scrum Master who could take ownership of this, because we might need some one-on-one, some education, some tips, hints, teaching. Hey, it's not just this. It's a common misconception, amongst other things. I would hope a good Scrum Master would just step in and take this on.
So are we okay with Scrum Master then?
But the DevOps also need planning, right? Each team, each role within, they plan accordingly to complete the task. So, everyone is a participant in the team to that planning to get the work done, within the time limitation of that sprint, whether it's 2 weeks or 4 weeks. And the Scrum Master here acts as a person who, if there is an impediment, resolved. So he's also part of the team. That's my thought.
So agreed. I think the question is, if this were an issue in your organization, who might be a good candidate or person to take ownership of this and maybe help mitigate or help resolve or help teach in this area?
Yeah,
would it
so
be
like
product owner, would it be Scrum Master, would it be team?
I'm leaning more toward the Scrum Master because, he's ultimately the one that is trying to, control what's going in on the daily scrums, I'm thinking. But I can also see there could be a Scrum Master and the product owner to try to force the issue of let's not just do things by the seat of our pants and fly by night. We've got to do better planning.
I think the Scrum Master should own it rather than the product owner because the Scrum Master, as was it Bruce just mentioned, kind of is more responsible for the cadence of that team. The product owner sometimes, that is a different mindset.
And also, just as a reminder, the Scrum Master is responsible for the process that the team follows. And so I would also lean towards the Scrum Master doing it, but I think everybody's sort of right because everybody on the team should be taking responsibility. But if you were to choose one person, it would probably be the Scrum Master. And again, like Nitin said, if this is a problem, like if this is an anti-pattern in your organization, where if you have teams that keep on saying, hey, we don't plan, we're Agile, right? So that's what that means. And Nitin, I think we hit the end of the time box. Did we?
Yes, we did. And very quickly, something came up in the chat as well. Maybe an Agile coach can help in this if there's someone outside the team who is available wearing that hat. Yeah. And also, Bob, why don't you put it in the Scrum Master box for now and move on to something else.
Okay.
Is there a way you can blow up the center a little bit more? I'm on an iPad and some other thing. It's a little, guys.
All right. Who wants to pick the next number?
What does that say, 17?
Yes, it starts at 1 and it ends at 19. So 17 is what you picked. Okay.
And what we'll try to do is we'll blow up the card so we can read the text, and then we'll put it in a circle and try to expand that as well so we know where they're landing.
Okay, here's one. We're doing a documentation sprint before we start coding. Can everybody see the card okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes, we can.
All right. So has this happened to anybody?
Yes.
Well, this happens when you're transitioning from predictive to agile. People are very documentation oriented. So I think that transition phase, this is an important thing to do because people feel left out. They basically think that, okay, what are we doing? It's a sudden shock for them. So yes, it does happen, but as we go, we can eliminate this. When we become more agile, we can eliminate this. Yes.
Yeah, I'm agreeing to what he just said. 'Cause I've actually done this to kind of go from the old, the waterfall to agile, and documentation was always part of the original plan. But you really don't need that in agile just because it's a little bit more agile. So I'm thinking this would kind of belong to more of the Scrum Master because again, it's the process we need to follow. So I think he would be the one in charge of trying to handle this type of issue.
Okay, then I guess the follow-on question is, would you allow this to happen? Is that the time, Nitin, or is that somebody else doing a time box for us?
Nope, that was someone else. We still got about 3 minutes.
Okay. All right. This happened to me, actually.
If I could chime in. So what we're saying is this card doesn't represent a sprint goal. And recently with the Scrum Guide update, the team gets into a sprint. They've got some product backlog items, and there's, hey, what are we doing and why are we doing it and how do we keep focused? So let's articulate a goal. So this card doesn't think, hey, yeah, our goal should be documentation for the next 2 weeks or so.
I would take it a step further where you need your backlog. Like in my company, we use Jira, And I had a product owner hand me a specification that's maybe 60, 70 pages. And they said, okay, is this it? Can we go? And I kind of pushed back. I said, no, we can't. Number one, this needs to be in JIRA. And number two, we can't tell the developers how to do it. A lot of times these documentation things have the how in it. They tell you specifically what you have to do. And so the way I got around it was I actually told the product owner that, you know, we need to get the items into JIRA, create the backlog, and then we can go from there. And then we can get started. Like I wouldn't even consider starting with a development team until you had that backlog built. And then once that backlog is built, you know, then the team's ready to come in and start working on it. Again, this is how Bob would approach something like this. And I'm sure everybody else has other experiences, how they do this as well. So now the question would be, where would this fall as far as if you had this problem? Like if people are saying we're going to do a documentation sprint now.
So just a follow-up question there. So when we're talking about documentation, are you talking about documentation from the coders or documentation of requirements going in? Because kind of where you were just talking about was the latter.
The way it was the latter, yes.
Okay, so requirements documentation coming into the team.
Yes.
Okay.
So would this fall under? Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the way I try and break this is by trying to push the team as much as possible to create that MVP without the documentation. But it's hard. Timer's up. We're done. I know we got 29 seconds.
30 seconds or so.
Product owner, I'm leaning towards.
I would probably put it between the Scrum Master and the product owner, but you know, we could go either way. What does everybody else think? Is that okay, or should we go?
I think Scrum Master and
I'm okay.
At the end of the day, the Scrum Master is almost responsible for all of this to some degree. So the question is, which one's more?
Right.
So can we put it between the two? Okay.
I would agree.
All right. Who wants to pick the next number? It starts at 1, it ends at 19.
19?
Okay. Our VP wants to know what tasks everyone is working on at any given point. Any thoughts on that one?
So this has to do with capacity utilization. So to some extent, you do need to know if there are poor performers, but that should come out in the sprint review. But you got to leave people buffer for being able to do their job.
So I guess I'd ask a leading question, like if your VP was asking for that information, does that sound like status reporting?
Sounds like micromanagement.
Exactly. I mean, why would the VP want to know what everybody's working on? I mean, he should be worried about the end result or, you know, the high-level status report. And he really wants to know what everybody's working on. We should have a transparent, you know, Jira board or a status running on a TV, you know, somewhere in the office where, you know anybody can take a look at, you know, what's going on.
Yeah, maybe this is business. Just show to VP the sprint planning.
Yeah, and also if you're using Kanban when you're doing Scrum, you get that automatically when you update the Kanban board. So the VP could easily just take a look at the Kanban board and see where everything is. And you can see who's working on it. If the person puts their initials on the card, or if you're doing swim lanes by person, you could definitely get a good view as far as what everybody's working on. And so who would be able to help with this if your organization was having a problem? And when I first saw this card, the first thing I was thinking of was status reporting. But you guys brought up some other insights that I didn't even think of. So who do you think would actually help manage this?
The owner.
I'm leaning toward the product owner because I'm thinking he would be the one reporting up whatever the status report is. So he would be the one in controlling the conversation to the VP.
And I would argue it's the Scrum Master, because they should be the one defending the team and telling them the proper way of getting metrics reported. So it's probably both.
Scrum Master.
Yeah, maybe between those, the product owner and the Scrum Master.
So can we put it in between?
Yeah.
Okay. And you're right. Everybody's comments were 100% correct. The Scrum Master is responsible for protecting the team. And so if I had that person coming along, the first thing I would do is I take the VP on the side and say, hey, by the way, you could see that if you look at the Kanban board, you could see exactly what everybody's doing. And then hopefully that would make the person happy and they wouldn't be asking for status reports anymore. But if you're still having those kinds of problems, then you probably get the product owner involved to make sure that the product owner has enough information to make the VP happy and let the team work. All right, so who wants to pick the next door?
And we did great on timing on this one.
Oh, good. We're getting better.
2B.
Yep, I heard 2B, and Nitin, if you could take a note of 6, we'll do that one next, because I heard 6 also.
All righty. B or not B?
You got the joke.
We can never get in touch with our product owner.
He or she should be replaced.
Yeah, definitely need to replace the product owner.
So it sounds, have you guys had this problem?
Let me tell you a quick story. I was working with a team that was just venturing and experimenting with Scrum, and I just put up something on the wall, although we have electronic tools. Thankfully, it was just one team co-located. So I used the blue tape, the swim lane, and then I did a Google search for a superhero with a cape, and I cut that out, and I got a picture of the product owner. I put the product owner's head there, stuck it up on the wall somewhere. Well, what's that about? I said, well, he's like a superhero. You hardly see him, you know. He only comes in and sweeping down on emergencies, if at all, you know, like Spider-Man or Batman. And they all had a chuckle, they all laughed. But it was still an issue.
That was a nice way of nudging the product owner, letting them know without telling them directly. Okay.
The corollary to this is the product owner who doesn't have the power, and they really have to talk to their boss, who's the real product owner.
Yeah,
and that
brings up a great point. Do we have a true product owner, or maybe a fake one?
Yeah. I've been having so many recent experiences that make me pull my hair out. We had a new product owner join the team, all right? And the team's really getting into this real deep discussion about how they're going to work. You know, they're coming up with great ideas of how they're going to work. And so what does the product owner say? We could talk about this, but we're not going to make any decisions today. I'm like, what? I was like, come on, you know, this is ideal. The team's actually telling you what they need to work, and you're telling them we're not going to, you know, I don't have the authority to say that we can do it this way. So it just totally blew my mind. But anyway, so who do you think this belongs with if we had this problem?
The product owner.
gotta tell the product owner to tell themselves, right? Yeah.
It's the Scrum Master because,
Yeah, it's the Scrum Master.
Elements.
Yeah, everybody okay with that? Would say it's the Scrum Master?
Now then, and without, you will recognize these names.
All right, so should we move on to the next?
Well, the next one, number 5.
Yeah.
Okay, I heard number 6. Somebody called out number 6, so I think we should do that one. And then we can go to number 5.
You know their names as well as I do. If you didn't get there,
if somebody could go on mute.
Got their mic on. They'll ask them to go on mute.
What is the background TV going on?
We might have to mute everybody. Are we okay?
I think we're good now.
Okay. All right. This one says, my bonus is based on how many product backlog items I complete per quarter. So this one's interesting. Anybody have this problem?
Yeah, I never heard that type of problem. It's very dangerous, and the guys are going to itemize all the items to have a small test on the backlog to be easy to complete.
You could extend this to a slightly different scenario as well. But go ahead.
Sorry, the mid-year reviews and end-of-the-year reviews are based on the individual performance. So, Agile is all about the team performance. I understand, but this particular thing is definitely based on what an individual does, over a period of time to get what he or she is supposed to get, for their merit increments or bonuses or whatever that is. But I don't want to speak to how it's done. Every organization does it differently. But I can't say what it should be.
Yeah, you're alluding to something that's still a challenge in the industry, and I really appreciate the insight. People are still looking at groups of people as individuals and how much work they take on, how many stories as an example, and they use that as some form of a metric, and that can really hit the team. So I'm just echoing your observations and your sentiments.
So I agree partly to what you said, but then again, a group cannot be given a certain bonus, like a 10% or a 15% bonus. A bonus is given by individual, right? Eventually, end of the year. So how is that done? That's done differently in every organization. So that's exactly what I was alluding to.
Oh, agreed. It's done differently across organizations. Adobe did that. There's a nice write-up on that. They rewarded the entire team. They finished up some things much earlier than expected. They all had a great celebration.
Absolutely, but then if there's a team of 4 people at the same level, this is assuming, or one individual does exceptionally well and the other one is low performer versus a high performer, that needs to be differentiated and distinguished. But otherwise, what's the incentive of being a high performer, right? That's another thing I wanted to bring up as well.
Yeah, that's common. Even here, Bob might be a high performer, a great facilitator, and suck. Who knows? We still move things forward, but who knows?
And this is one of the things that what I'm viewing, like I worked in multiple companies, and HR still seems to be stuck on that individual performance review and individual merit increases, individual bonuses if they're, if they're even available. And that's something where Agile teams is supposed to be all about the team. And it's just something that it's to me, it's just going to take time. And HR has to let go of the old way of measuring people. And really, wouldn't it be really cool if the business gave a team $100,000? I'm dreaming, and the team just figures out how to divvy it up. That would be cool. But again, it's not. It's going to take. It's like, to me, that's a long way away. But that if the team knows what everybody did, so they should be able to figure out how to divvy that money up. But again, I haven't seen that in my experience yet. But I think that would be like the ultimate place to be. Plus, have a company be willing to pay a team $100,000. That'd be really nice too, right? As a bonus.
Agile management.
Any other thoughts?
Embedded into all the departments, I guess, of the organization to understand that.
So where would we place this if we had this problem? I don't think it would be the dev team. I don't. Is it the product owner? Is it the Scrum Master? What does everybody think?
It's between product owner and Scrum Master, I guess, in the center.
The Scrum Master has to identify it, but the product owner has to execute it.
Okay, and just in time for the bell. So what number? I think I heard somebody say number 5, so we'll do that one next. And the next one, nobody called out a number, so we'll do that. We'll let people call out. Well, how many times has this happened to you? I was pulled off the sprint and put onto an emergency project again. Now, I like that word again there. So is this a problem?
Well, I think it's
a
particular resource because that resource is highly skilled and sought after. He or she knows a lot, and that's probably why the resource is being pulled out and being put on something emergency. It's like a firefighting kind of thing.
So I could share a story, Nitin, unless you have one.
Well, I always have stories, but I sometimes like yours too, Bob. Go ahead.
Okay. You're a good storyteller, what can I say? All right. Well, right now I'm coaching a Scrum Master that's helping a mainframe team transition to Agile. And what they're identifying is there's individuals that have skills that nobody else knows. And it puts my organization at high risk because of this. Because what happens if the person gets sick or they decide they don't want to work anymore? And so this is a major problem. And so what they're doing is they're pair programming. They're taking these highly skilled people and they're pairing them up with other developers. So that way, when they work, they'll do some knowledge sharing and knowledge transfer. And those kinds of things. So if more than one person knows how to do it, that's a way to start alleviating the problem. But it's a major risk, and I think a lot of companies have that because there's people out there that just really enjoy saving the day and knowing everything, and it's just their personality. Any other thoughts or comments about this?
I mean, the only comment I have is, some people love to share their knowledge and some people don't. And if the individual is someone, who's willing to share that experience and knowledge with others, great. If not, that's a problem. But yes, absolutely, pair programming and knowledge sharing is the way to go with this.
And so if you had this problem in your organization, who would be what role would it be? Development, product owner, Scrum Master?
Development team.
I also think that the Scrum Master has to protect the team and say, if you're going to do this, you can't do this in the middle of the sprint. And we've made commitments.
Great.
So we'll put it between the two?
Yep.
Okay.
I have a question. Are these type of situations, is it possible that the product owner kind of has maybe leverage, negotiation power with other departments? Is that possible? Or no?
Absolutely. Yes, because your product owner should be somebody that's pretty well connected in the organization. So yes. So are you saying the product owner might also be involved with that? So
right. I was saying, yep. You know, sometimes you could leverage somebody's connections or somebody's inherent power and be able to convince others to leave the team alone and let them follow their process.
All right. Well, thanks for sharing that.
I was going to say, also, I think the product owner might have, has influence on the budget, because when you're doing paired programming, you're going to pay more, but it's going to reduce their risk in the long run. So they're going to also help with that, because if you're doing paired programming, you're going to have more resources in the beginning, or less resources, depending on how you look at it.
I think this one also relates to a card we talked about earlier. We don't plan, we do things on the fly. So it kind of relates to that one also.
Yeah, it's interesting how all these things tie together.
I have a quick question around the pair programming. How effective is it if you have a contractor and you are trying to pair program with an employee?
It depends on the contractor. But a lot of times, you'll try and sometimes the contractors have really a lot of knowledge, and you want the employee to absorb it. So you almost have the employee be the person on the hands-on keyboard, so that they absorb the knowledge of the contract.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I think you're also getting a little bit into organizational dynamics and culture. You might have a contractor, but how does the organization see this person? Is there a sense of belonging? Is it all one cohesive team? And is it a learning team? And are those boundaries a little blurry, or the hope that they're not there? So people can get along. Well, hey, I've been here for so long. I'm part of the team. Hey, I'm a contractor. I don't know when I'll be tomorrow. So there are a lot more other things that can go into it. But yeah, the underlying thing is that you can knowledge share, maybe teach other a few tips and tricks along the way. That'd be great. So
okay, can
that the timer go off?
Okay, let's pick the next card. We have 3B, 4A and B, 5B, 8, 12. What numbers do you guys like?
12.
Okay, 12. We talked about this at the beginning, I think. I love being agile since it means I don't have to write documentation anymore. Okay. Based on the laughing I'm hearing, I think other people have had this problem.
So what is the definition of done?
Depends what the team and the product owner decide, right?
That's a great question, Seth.
User story elaboration is one of the key documentation that we have to create. Otherwise, it just gets difficult, to understand what needs to be developed, what needs to be worked on. So documentation definitely happens to an extent, but not like a predictive or a waterfall. There is documentation, minimal documentation, but we have to do that. That's mandatory, I think.
So it's interesting that there's like these two different schools of the input and the output. I'm definitely sitting in a place where our functional specifications are really, for the business side, the only kind of view into how something actually works under the covers a bit, and really struggle with getting good functional documentation coming out of the project. So, I mean, coders are kind of infamous for not documenting well, right? And it seems to be, I guess, probably a question more than a statement is, what are some best practices for making sure within Agile teams, the technical teams are documenting as they're going along, as they're developing and going through, right? And to make sure that is happening. And there's code reviews and things like that, with paired programming that happen. But, unless you're making time for documentation review, how are you ensuring that's getting done?
Well, in my organization, I'm sorry, in my organization, we have BSAs doing the documentation for these user stories, and they are also a separate testing team testing once the coding is completed. So we have business requirements / user story elaboration / test cases being documented. So it's not zero documentation, definitely not. There is documentation that happens, at least where I work.
Right, but that goes back to the requirements and making sure that they're being delivered. Now I'm talking about 6 months down the road, and there's an issue, and somebody needs to know what changes happened. Did something get rolled out in a recent release or something like that? Being able to know what's happened in the actual code.
So let's make a distinction very quickly on code comments or code documentation as compared to, let's say, feature documentation or application documentation, maybe from a business side. And both are valid points, and both are valid scenarios, and both happen.
We used to have best practices where inside the code, they would put summaries of their modules and things. And that if you do it ahead of time, you can have something that would pull that out and kind of generate some functional. We tried doing that for a while.
So comment within the code is what I'm hearing. Is that correct?
Right. And then that's part of the code review, that has to be in there.
Right. It's interesting, if I could just supplement what's being said. A lot of people think of developers as writing code, but we forget they also read. There's actually an opportunity here if you go to the developers and say, hey, as we're growing, as we're evolving, if we have new members come in, maybe move on, do we want to document within the code? And if so, how do we want to do it so that it's not burdensome with weight, Maybe you can create your own standards and do it that way. So if you present it in a slightly positive way, that could work from the dev standpoint. Those are just a few of my thoughts and what I've tried. And of course, there's the business side of it as well. Anecdotally, I was speaking to someone in leadership while we were transitioning, and he was very concerned about documentation. I said, did you know that we can document a lot more or in a lot of different ways using Scrum than Waterfall? And he almost fell off his chair. I said, yeah, I can give you 4 ways of documenting. In Waterfall, you usually have 1. Well, what do you mean? I said, well, if you're writing user stories, which we're doing, you could write something, hey, as part of the acceptance criteria, that such and such should be documented. That's one. Second thing is, if you have a blanket thing, kind of like global requirements, that's the lingo he was used to, maybe having your definition of done. Something has to be documented, and this is where it should be. Third thing is, I kind of don't like the best way, but here's another thing. Hey, have a user story. It's kind of like a documentation thing, saying, hey, given all the stories that we have completed for this sprint, it all has to be documented. So every day, a little bit is being hashed out in documentation, and you're keeping up with it. And then you might even do something else. Which is kind of, again, I'm not a fan, but I have a user story just for documenting things that were completed in its entirety for the previous sprint. So that in itself is complete, and you move further than maybe 2 weeks out in documentation. Well, there's actually more ways as well, but I had to kind of help him get off the chair and was smiling after that. Yeah, I didn't think of all those scenarios. I said, yeah, we're not taking away from it. They're just different ways of doing it.
Okay, we have 2 minutes left. So where will we put this? Should we basically, would it belong with development, the product owner, the scrum master, all three?
Product owner.
But the dev team does documentation.
Yeah.
And the product owner needs to work on definition of done.
So would you put it, and the scrum master might help, so would it be all three or just the dev team and the product owner?
The scrum master is responsible for everything, so put it between the dev team and the product owner.
Okay, we can leave it there. And so with that, I can call this discussion group over and let me stop the recording.